All right, welcome back to RTW'S Wild History Ride. I'm Thomas.
I'm Will.
And I'm Rhonda.
And today we are going to be discussing the lost colony of Roanoke, which some historians have even been quoted as calling the Area 51 of colonial history. So to start us out, Rhonda.
Definitely, let me jump in. And not to be confusing, when I was younger, when I was a kid, I thought Roanoke, the lost colony, was the actual city of Roanoke in Virginia. No, Roanoke, the lost colony, was in the Outer Banks of Virginia. So it's not the inland city. So
That's what I thought.
Wanted to put that out there. Like I said, when I was a kid, I thought, hey, look, it's not really
It's
lost.
Roanoke.
But anyway, so let's get started. Walter Raleigh was issued a charter in 1584 to establish a colony in North America. So he had to establish the colony by 1591 or lose his right to colonize. So, let me back up just a little bit. The lost colony of Roanoke was actually the second settlement on Roanoke Island, and again in the Outer Banks. The first colony failed. It was settled in...
Miserably.
Miserably, that's true, miserably. Okay, so it had failed, and the colony was established by Ralph Lane, a population of 108 men, and the colony was abandoned in 1586. 3 colonists were left behind, and they were never heard from again. Now, this was a colony of it was men. There were no women, no children. So, my opinion, they were there looking for something: riches, gold, silver, resources that could be used. To me, they didn't really come there with the plan of creating a village or a settlement or
There
a
was
town.
no intention of farming, of cattle, of
No.
any form of herds.
There didn't seem to be. No.
All right, yeah.
And like I said, it was abandoned, lack of supplies, hostile relationships with the Native Americans, lack of interest in some colonists because they found no gold and no silver. The second settlement was established by John White, again under the Walter Raleigh charter, and this was in 1587. Okay, the expedition consisted of 3 ships, approximately 115 men, women, and children to establish the colony. Again, men, women, and children. So they had plans to really establish a colony. Okay, on July 22nd of 1587, 2 ships arrived in Croatoan Island. July 25th, the 3rd ship arrives. Now, the original location of the colony was supposed to be Chesapeake Bay, but from what I can see, what I've researched, the colonists were forced to disembark. And I'm doing air quotes. A gentleman from from the flagship ordered the sailors to leave the colonists on Roanoke.
Who was that? I'm like, no.
I have no idea
That's
who it
such
was.
a
But
genius idea.
Well, I'm just only assuming, thinking back, they had, I'm sure, a good reason to. I'm sure
Well,
there was a good reason.
It's just going to lead more thoughts to the conspiracy theories
Yes.
later that we will discuss
Very
later
much
on.
so,
Yeah.
yes.
I mean, who is this strange man mysteriously saying "get off"?
yeah.
I think
I
it was
mean-
somebody in a time machine. I don't know.
It was the devil himself telling them to go die.
Okay, well, so this was late July. Now, August 18th of 1857, Eleanor Dare, who is the daughter of John White, gives birth to Virginia Dare, and obviously she's named after the area, or for Queen Elizabeth, the Virgin Queen, and she's the first English child born in Virginia. Okay. By the time the fleet's preparing to return to England, the colonists have decided to relocate 50 miles up the Albemarle Sound. So, John White returns to England November 5th of 1587, and by this time, there's really bad relationships between England and Spain. So, Queen Elizabeth prohibits ships from leaving England because there's a report there's a Spanish armada that's going to invade. So, White doesn't return actually he returns, let's see, I'm looking through my notes, late 1587, 1588, but bad weather keeps the ships from leaving until later. It was April of 1588, and he doesn't make it to Roanoke Island because the captains of those ships actually go chase several Spanish ships, and the English ships are attacked by French mariners or pirates near Morocco. So that rescue expedition kind of fails miserably.
Yeah.
They don't even get close. The supplies they had for the Roanoke Island or the colony are looted, and the ships have to return to England. So he actually doesn't make it back until 1590. And when he returns, he finds the settlement abandoned and the word Croatoan carved into some fencing. Apparently the colonists had built a fortification around their village or their homes, and he finds this word carved into it.
And I believe there was another one, either in a tree or in another area of fencing, that they just got CRO carved into.
Yes,
Yeah.
I heard that. I remember Miss White when I was going through, AP history back in the day. That was one of the big talks about it, was the tree, and then one said crow, and I think another one said
Croatoan, yeah.
So it was just assumed.
Yeah, and he had planned to travel to Croatoan Island, but was unable to travel there because of rough seas and lost an anchor, so had to return to England.
So literally it was a walking, talking Murphy's Law situation. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong.
Yes, absolutely.
That's right. It just it's so funny to me, we were I was talking about this with Rhonda before we recorded and everything, and it's funny to think how a lot of this thing could have been prevented. We were talking about some of the other local skirmishes and things that they had with the natives around that time, and the particular one that I looked up was with a local Native American chief. He was the leader of the Secotan Native American tribe. It's Wingina. So he originally, during that first kind of escapade into having a colony, Ralph Lane was encouraged to go into the mainland to find more riches and to find what the mainland had, because obviously at that time they weren't living it up, hitting the big time, going up to the west side over at the colony where they were. So they ended up going into the mainland in order to search for more things. So I was looking more into that, and as they were sent further into the mainland, Wingina actually reported to other Native American leaders to not trust him, to not feed the colonists as they were going more inland, to withdraw from their villages, to do all of these things. So it was kind of building more tension in between the Native Americans and the English colonists at the time.
Well, now, do you think? And again, this is the first colony. And it was men, which we assume maybe they were military background, or maybe that's an assumption on my part. But do you think that he was getting them away from his tribe because maybe the colonists were becoming too dependent on his people to take care of them or to feed them?
That's a very likely possibility, but at the same time, he could have seen that it was just a group of large men who, let's be honest, a group of large men stuck with each other for a long period of time. They're likely to get aggressive. I mean,
that's very true.
Imagine just being dudes on a ship. I mean, it takes months to go from England to the United States on a ship like that.
Guys being dudes.
To Virginia on a ship like that. So you're stuck with these guys for months, and then you land. You're with these same guys for months. Yeah. Trying to figure out how to survive. You're getting desperate. If you're a leader of a group that's already here, you got to be thinking, okay, what's going to happen next? So it could have been he didn't want them dependent, or it could have been he was just trying to be as proactively defensive as he could.
Yes, that's
Gotcha.
very true. Well, then I guess as soon as, after we were talking about that, the first colony that ended up in turmoil, you have these substantiated leaders, I was reading, Ralph Lane, he had colonized Ireland apparently in 1583 and also was the County Kerry, Ireland sheriff from 1583 to 1585. I bet that was probably a big hit to his ego, knowing that, you couldn't really sustain a colony, which I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't be able to sustain a colony, so I don't want to even pretend like I would be able to. But it just goes to show that all these lucrative exploits that they thought they were going to hit, it ended up not being, because as we know, we're not just swimming in gold and jewels and stuff over here.
No, you got to go to the right location.
Yeah, got to go to the right location.
But
I don't think these are
the whole continent isn't just gold rich.
Yes.
So like they were thinking.
Well, let me throw something out here. I don't understand how, and I assume these people had skills, maybe carpenters, ship makers, whatever, bakers, I don't know, I'm speculating.
Candlestick makers.
Because, we don't have that kind of information, or at least I haven't found that kind of information. But wouldn't you think they would have guns so that they could shoot deer or buffalo or whatever happened to be roaming in the area, birds, I don't know, or could make nets and fish, or scoop fish up out of the water.
Very true.
I mean, supposedly this country, 500 years ago was very rich in wildlife. Yes.
Yeah.
So I don't know how you could, again, this is me speculating, and maybe it was the time of the year they arrived. I don't know. But how could you starve to death if you have game and fish and things that you could harvest off the land?
Well, and also deteriorating relationships with the natives. We've always, when you hear about it, it's always like, oh, we're going to take your land, taking all this kind of stuff anyway. So that was one of the things they were doing. But they even had extra help. There were two. There was Monotonic, which was one that Lane's party kind of got involved with. They defeated him, and he ended up saying that there was another powerful leader to the northeast. And I always think of Pocahontas when I think of this. It was the Powhatan leader back then that would have provided even more lucrative opportunities, but it was just kind of, I guess, getting them more further inland, and they're using up all their stuff unnecessarily.
All their resources.
And, which, granted, I mean, you got to eat, but at the same time, it's just, it's unfortunate. I just feel like a lot of it could have been hopefully prevented. I guess I'm looking at it through 2021 glasses here.
Yeah.
But that's interesting. I think that's very interesting. So then after, were we right at, I guess, like whenever they got back to the,
the States. Or what
got
would
back,
become the States.
Yes. So I guess like he gets back there, Rhonda, and does he find anything else, or do they see anything else that you found or anything?
No, but there were 3 more attempts to locate the colony. Walter Raleigh claimed to be in search of the lost colony in 1595, but actually sailed past the Outer Banks, claiming weather prevented him from landing. So, and keep in mind too, a lot of these were privateers. They were after Spanish treasure. So, they maybe the lost colony, it obviously wasn't as important to maybe some of these people. And if they weren't, and if they saw a ship or had some kind of knowledge, hey, this is going on, there's a treasure ship or whatever leaving for Spain out of North America, we can go capture the ship. And maybe that was their focus, was treasure, and not so much finding these colonists.
Mm-hmm.
And let's be clear, that's exactly what privateers were. They were just government-sanctioned pirates.
Mm-hmm.
They're actually what led to the golden age of piracy, was all these privateers had their commissions revoked, and so they took their ships and started plundering the seas. So you've got all these guys who are supposed to be helping, but they're basically scoundrels at heart.
Yeah.
I mean, and this is coming from somebody who's descended from privateers. I mean, they may have good morals, they may have good stuff every now and then, but they got that lust for adventure. Who really wants to go and find this colony that's been missing for years when you can go and, oh, an Englishman, I just killed these Spaniards.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I just killed these Frenchmen. Oh, I just plundered all these ships and made such a dent in their naval
In their
forces.
military might.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, you want those accomplishments. You want to achieve something because, as I said, these are privateers. These are guys who are passionate, driven, and quite frankly, very, very aggressive. Now, maybe not necessarily murderous, but they're aggressive. They're going towards their goal. And sure, they're fine dropping people off here and there along the way, but their main goal is what's in front of them. They don't care about this stuff on the side.
Adventure, treasure.
Yes.
It's just always so funny. You hear saying that, all these people were probably so excited to go over there. Cue them months later, probably being frazzled with no clothes, like yelling for help, freezing for help. I'm like, please get me off this island.
Yes.
Like,
No
my
food,
gosh.
no clothes, or the weather's terrible. They're freezing. They didn't anticipate all this.
Which is it's just so sad and to think about. But I was thinking about, we were talking about Virginia Dare, the child that was born. she actually ended up becoming some kind of kind of a figurehead for a lot of movements. Some of them probably aren't the best movements to be involved with.
We're not going to talk.
We're not talking about those. Don't even care to entertain those.
No,
But
not worth the energy.
But I
talk
do
about that
like
stuff.
the fact that she was a symbol for hope, but also mystery. You don't really know what happened.
Yeah. Well, and actually there were 2 more searches There was one in 1602. Again, bad weather prevented the search. Supposedly, it was intended to find the colonists, but what happened was they were harvesting sassafras, which I don't know if everybody knows what sassafras is, and that was south of the Croatoan island. And whenever they did finally, after their harvest, I guess, had time to go back and look for the colony, bad weather kept them from landing. And then another voyage took place in 1603, but the landing team was actually killed by Native Americans.
This sounds like a cursed area.
It does. It's like, yeah, I don't think you want any of that.
This is the Bermuda Triangle of the, Virginia colonies, or whatever. I don't even know.
But actually, and when I was researching this, as early as 1605, there was speculation that the colony had assimilated with nearby Native American communities. Mm-hmm. So that, and I guess we need to turn this over to Thomas to talk about what the speculation is, what the conspiracy theories are. But as early as the early 1600s, it was thought that these people had assimilated with the Native Americans.
Yes.
And honestly, I think it was probably in Walter Raleigh's best interest to keep the colony alive in everyone's imagination, because that way he didn't lose his charter. They could say, well, there's colonists still alive out there. So, and he had to have it colonized by 1591 or lose that charter.
Well, he was a very successful person otherwise. I'm telling you, it probably would have been a big hit to his ego, having 115 people missing and not accounted for.
And maybe that could account for why these landings were, we have bad weather, we can't land, we can't search. Maybe if they kept that in everyone's imagination that some of these people are still alive, then he wouldn't lose that charter. So you have to wonder what some of the motives were.
I like it. I like a good conspiracy theory for back in the late 1500s, early 1600s.
Kidding. But I'm not really going to cover too much of the hypotheses because there's a couple that are pretty decently founded. Most of what I'm going to talk about is the lost colony and Croatoan in our popular culture. So first off, the two hypotheses that seem most likely. One is that they attempted a return trip to England and were just shipwrecked and lost at sea. And that's very, very possible because you've got these people who have possibly been starving. The reason everything was stripped down was because they might have been using the wood as lumber or as materials. They could have been doing all sorts of things to try and build a boat and make it home. And to be perfectly honest, ships that size, unless it's something like a Viking longboat, something of that design, is very unlikely to make it to England by itself. That's why when smaller ships were traveling, they were usually guarded by bigger ships.
With bigger ships.
So you'd either have to know how to build a ship of decent design to survive the trek, or be incredibly lucky.
They needed a
And
flunky.
given the fact that they didn't land in England and weren't found in England, it's unlikely they built a ship like that.
Well, let me throw something out here. So no ships were left with the colonists?
I thought that there was one, at least one of the penances or whatever, penas. I don't know how you really pronounce it. I'm not a mariner, surprisingly. But one of the things that I looked at, I think, is those are smaller, more mercantile type of ships that probably weren't
like just going
huge.
Around the same continent kind of thing.
Yeah.
You don't want to take it too far into open water.
Not a transatlantic journey or anything.
No.
Gotcha.
And then one of the other theories is, like was discussed, that they had gone and interbred with local communities. Now, of course, Croatoan we talked about is the name of the island. The people are the Croatan. And there's a thought that they had made an agreement. They discussed it with White that if he'd returned and something had happened, that there would be signs. And so he thought that was part of the agreement. The Croatan was them telling him where to find them. So it's believed that they could have possibly gone to the Croatan Islands and interbred. And there's even actually a play. It's a comedy called The Eastward Ho. Sorry. Which features characters bound for Virginia who are assured that the lost colonists had by that time intermarried with Native Americans to give, I'm sorry, I'm laughing so hard at this, to give rise to a whole country of English.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, anyone who understands the basics of genetics.
Well, they didn't at that time. They didn't know, they weren't doing the Mendel's P.
So they're sitting here thinking, oh yeah, these people, White is so strong, it's just going to cover everything up. doesn't work that way. You got a lot more Native American tribes, and you got white people at the time. It's not going to work that way.
Yeah.
But so that was one of their theories, and they, like you were talking about, they found evidence of more fair-haired tribesmen, which some attribute it to a more likelihood of albinism in that given region. So again, so many of these things we don't know the answer to.
Well,
It's
they
all just
said
opinions.
too, like we were even talking about Rhonda and me before, that there was even a few voyages or whatever. There was like a 1602 voyage, but with Samuel Mace, that whenever he had, I think, gotten some Powhatan Indians to take back, he said that, or they were able to communicate. Oh, Native Americans, y'all. I'm sorry, Native Americans. That is the school system that said Indians from a very young age. Unfortunately, they were living in the region apparently at the time, is what the Powhatan Indians said. That they could converse with the English and say that, oh yeah, there were some living with us at the time or something. Which I don't know. Who knows if that was true or not? If it's hearsay, who knows?
But now, moving on into the pop culture references, there are numerous plays and things produced regarding the Lost Colony, usually trying to paint them in a very, very hopeful, energetic light. Like there is one, and now it was more or less forgotten after a time until we get back to the 1800s. And that's when these plays and things started coming out, because people just kind of got like it's kind of like the craze now where we think about the 80s more.
Yeah.
Where people are reminiscing about the 80s, even though, let's be honest, shoulder pads and high hair wasn't exactly the most
Rhonda
beautiful
loved
things in
the
the world.
Rhonda, you loved the 80s.
Yeah, I love the 80s.
my
Big
God.
earrings. Oh my gosh.
So they wanted people to turn into heroes. So you have plays or a historical romance called Virginia Dare or The Lost Colony, where the author, Eliza Lanesford Cushing, casts Virginia Dare as this beautiful young woman wearing the skin of a white doe, and where she was raised by the natives.
Virginia wasn't that old. How old was Virginia? Was Virginia? I thought Virginia was a baby.
She was a baby. It's taking place after.
I was like,
after
"God,
the
she
colony
was
was lost.
Yeah, this is speculating that she was
Raised by the
Native
natives
American tribe.
afterwards.
Well, I like that. I
So
watched that.
and that is frequently used in let's see.
I like
Now that was just weird. This one is I guess it would be a play. Raleigh Register serial by Mary Mason employs the premise of Virginia being magically transformed into a white doe. So they started using a white doe as an image for her.
She was a magical girl. She was Sailor Moon before Sailor Moon was a thing.
Wow. So basically they, again, like you were saying, where they try and put a symbolism over her.
Yes.
They used a white doe, which pure white, like doves and things like that, are usually shown to symbolize innocence. And so they're trying to show that she was innocent and hopeful and a symbol for everything.
Virginia,
But then,
she's not collecting any of her coin from all this stuff. I'm telling you.
but later, towards the late 1900s, where you have people like Stephen King and Harlan Ellison, where they start doing more paranormal type things with the Lost Colony and Croatoan, where I believe it doesn't say anything about what King specifically had Croatoan as, but it was in a miniseries called Storm of the Century. And I do remember this, Supernatural, which just ended its 15-year run this past year. They had the Croatoan virus, which was a demonically engineered virus that caused people to go crazy, almost not really a zombie virus, but close enough. And then you have, where was it? Where you have a Batman comic, a Batman Spawn comic called War Devil, where Croatoan was the name of a powerful demon who in the 20th century attempts to sacrifice the entirety of Gotham City to Satan.
I mean, listen.
There's a 2015 novel called The Last American Vampire, where the crow, in comparison to the Croatoan, was short for Crowley. and they were
Crowley.
and they were the victims of a vampire named Crowley, who.
That sounds supernatural too. Like,
does.
I love that character.
Yes,
He was great.
yeah.
But yeah, so you have things like that, and then you have one of the seasons of American Horror Story, which is called American Horror Story Roanoke, where it's literally a focus on the ghosts of the colonists, where the leader of the undead colonists, the Butcher, is depicted as John White's wife, which I don't think historically there's any evidence to support that she was actually there at the time that everybody went missing. Because, again, we're talking about 500 years ago.
That's interesting.
But yeah, so there's also well, I'm not going to get into that one, but basically, people take stories and weird, mysterious things that happen in our world and turn into something cool. I mean, I loved Supernatural, and I loved those episodes that focus on it because it was so interesting. And there's even, I believe it was even last year, another CW series, Legacies, a spinoff of the Vampire Diaries. They had a monster who was a giant pilgrim who caused people to forget things.
I remember that one.
Or he did
A giant what?
A giant pilgrim.
A pilgrim.
He literally.
How frightening.
He had a big old belt buckle.
No, he looked like a zombie scarecrow pilgrim. This very creepy looking thing.
Oh, wow.
And he would kill people who kept secrets or told lies, and he was called Croatoan.
Cue these people being like, "Can I just have some food?" Like literally, all we're doing all this with this stuff, and these people.
But we're taking just simple words who. It's literally the name of the island.
Yeah.
And you're turning it into the name of a demon or something because there's a mystery surrounding it.
There is.
And you take a mystery and you turn something so simple and so easy into whatever you want.
And it'll never be solved. That's the weird thing about it.
And I guess that's part of it because it will not be solved. I mean, from what I'm reading, if they were to find something like a female skeleton and could get the mitochondria and DNA, maybe they could determine,
like trace the lineage or
right,
like do
maybe,
something like
and
that.
if they could
That'd be
find,
cool.
Maybe a Native American tribe and somehow trace to see if they did assimilate, and maybe that's what happened to these people. But you're right. We'll never know. I mean, that's highly unlikely that something something like that would ever be found. And it's interesting because growing up, it was like, oh, lost colony. Okay, so these people disappeared. No one knew what happened to them, and that was it. Now, learning about all this more pop culture type stuff, that it's actually still out there, that people think about it, and it's still
crazy.
Even
people are
as
even interested
recent
in it.
as like
It's
the past
amazing.
couple years.
I could only hope I could have a legacy like that.
Yeah, we're talking about over 500 years ago.
Yes.
That's so cool. It's so cool. It's just, I remember learning about this story in school, and just hearing a little bit of it was so interesting. It was like the most interesting part of my history book. I was like, I looked it up right after.
Oh, and I'm sorry, I don't think it's 500 years ago. I think my math is bad. It's over 400 years at least.
You're right. Over 400.
I'm like,
430.
You'd be like, man, I'm like the 800
let me
years
think
ago.
about that. Okay.
Yeah, well,
The
it's close
13th
to. Okay, I'm
century.
sorry, but once you get to the point where it's over 400 years, it's might as well be 500 to me.
I know
Close
it.
enough. You're right. Close enough.
Well, we were looking at you were talking about the mitochondrial DNA. I'd seen an article within the past 5 years or so that said that there were pottery and evidence of some pottery found like 50 miles or so away from the original colony, and it was substantiated or not substantiated. It was not. It was hypothesized, I suppose, that there were maybe some forts that they tried to go to after they retreated from the Roanoke, just to say that, maybe they got tired of waiting and they didn't have any food, so they were trying to go somewhere else. So, that was another thing. I don't think it's ever been substantiated or anything, and I don't really know how you would determine whether or not that was pottery. Oh, from Roanoke, I don't know. But that's just an interesting thing to think about.
Well, yeah, and like I had said, before the fleet left, they had decided that they were going to go inland like 50 miles. But you don't see these people going to look for them 50 miles inland. I mean, they barely even look for them. Yeah, they were going to relocate 50 miles up Albemarle Sound. But there's nothing that these rescuers or missions were looking in that area, and they just barely even landed on Roanoke Island.
Well, they were saying
these rescue missions, and I'm doing air quotes.
Rescue. They were saying they were singing songs, I believe is what they said, singing English songs that they would have known. They're like, "Hey," we're just going by, like, "Are you there?" Like, just imagining that being in the tree line, I suppose.
That's like me driving through this road going, Hey,
I know that it is though.
come home.
That's what it is.
It's
That's
like
what I
when a
do like
dog
that.
gets lost and you're not even bothering shouting. You're just going, Maggie,
Yep.
Maggie.
Oh, I'm like, bless them though. I guess they just didn't really have very high expectations at that time. But
Maybe not. Or
that
they
is
had
sad.
other interests, other motives. I'm not sure.
They did. But that was interesting.
But all right, on that note, well, actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. First, we want to thank everyone for listening. We are well over 100 downloads now.
Yeah, we're
Yes.
at almost 150, I think now.
Yes.
Getting close.
And so we want to thank everyone and to remind you to check out our Twitter. As of right this second, we are having issues with Instagram, and we will post something to Twitter once I get Instagram and Facebook fixed. But Twitter is working. It's RTW
Wild, I think.
Yes. And so go there, comment, give us suggestions, and we'll catch you next time.
We'll catch you next time, you guys. It's been a lot of fun.
Oh, and share this with your friends.
Yes, definitely. Get the word out. Just spam it. Let the whole world hear it if you
I'm
like
telling
us.
you. I'm ready for it to take off. I'm ready. I'm going to quit my day job. Let's see.
All right, we'll see you next week.
All right, bye, you guys.